Hello, history detectives. I'm Henry.
And I'm Kath, and we're very glad you've joined us again. Today we're going to look at the story of Robin Hood.
Oh, brilliant. I love Robin Hood. He was an outlaw who lived in Sherwood Forest with his merry band, Little John and Friar Tuck and Maid Marion.
That's right. And they
stole from the rich and they gave to the poor and had a wonderful time.
Well, yes, but...
And he beat the wicked sheriff of Nottingham and defied the bad King John, and was loyal to King Richard, who was away on the Crusades.
Well, that's what the stories say, yes.
Robin Hood was a fox, and Little John was a bear, and King Richard was a lion.
You're thinking of the Disney film, aren't you? But Robin Hood has been in stories and legends ever since the 14th century. History can be a bit like that, though. It's changed every time somebody else has told the story. The Disney version is a bit different to that at the start. Shall I tell you a story of Robin Hood?
Oh, yes, please.
In merry England in the time of old, there lived within the green glades of Sherwood Forest a famous outlaw whose name was Robin Hood. No archer ever lived that could fire an arrow with such skill as his. Nor were there ever such fine people as the merry band that lived within Sherwood Forest. They had no cares, and they were loved by all the people round about, for Robin helped everyone that came to him for help in time of need. One merry morning, when all the birds were singing, up rose Robin Hood. At last he came to a broad pebbly stream, spanned by a narrow bridge made of a log. As he drew close to this bridge, he saw a tall stranger coming from the other side. Robin quickened his pace, as did the stranger likewise, each thinking to cross first. "Now stand back," called Robin, "and let the better man cross first." "Nay," answered the stranger, "stand back yourself, for I am the better man." "You speak like a donkey," said Robin, "for I could fire this arrow before you could eat a roast goose." "And you speak like a coward," answered the stranger, "for you stand there with a bow to shoot, while I have nothing in my hand but a staff." "I am no coward," replied Robin. "I will put down my trusty bow, and I will cut a staff like yours to fight." I will wait for you," said the stranger, and he stood on his staff, leaning and waiting for Robin, whistling as he looked about. Never was there a better fight than this. First, Robin made a feint, and then delivered a blow at the stranger's head that, had it met its mark, would have knocked him into the water. And many blows were given and received by each in that time, till here and there were sore bones and bumps, yet neither thought of them crying enough, nor even seemed likely to fall off the bridge. At last, Robin gave such a blow on the ribs that the stranger almost fell off the bridge. But he regained himself quickly, and by a dexterous blow thwacked Robin so hard that he fell into the water. "Ha! And where art thou now, my good lad?" shouted the stranger, roaring with laughter. "Oh, in the water, and floating down with the tide," cried Robin, but he could not help laughing. "Give me your hand," cried he. "You are a brave soul and a good fighter. Will you be one of my merry crew?" "I will," answered the stranger. "I am called John Little." But Robin loved a good joke, and as he looked at the giant, said, "Nay, fair little stranger, you shall be called Little John." What a great story. Robin Hood and Little John had such great adventures. But did they actually exist? Historians believe that the stories were just made up, and it's possible that Robin Hood didn't even exist. Now, police detectives look at all the evidence and then they make their decision. That's what history detectives have to do too. So come on, history detectives, let's go.
I've been doing research on this, Kath. Shall I go first? The case for Robin Hood being a real outlaw that lived in Sherwood Forest. The stories of Robin Hood included really bad people in the history books and real places. There was Prince John, who was a bad person, and King Richard I, who was also called Richard the Lionheart. Richard was the King of England from 1189 to 1199. He had sworn an oath that he would free Jerusalem, and so off he went with his knights to fight in the Crusades. Things didn't go well for him there, and on his way back to England, Richard was captured. Prince John had stayed back in England with lands and money that made him rich, but John rebelled against Richard's chancellor, who had been left in charge, and tried to take over. He even plotted with the King of France to make Richard stay in prison. That sounds a lot like bad Prince John from the Robin Hood stories, doesn't it? Anyway, England had already paid the ransom for Richard's release, so he was set free and sailed back to England. When Richard returned, he went around defeating the barons who had supported John, and one of them was in Nottingham. Richard laid siege to the castle of Nottingham, and after he had beaten him, went hunting in Sherwood Forest. This really is true because one of Richard's knights wrote about it. King John went hunting in Sherwood Forest later when he was king, so both Richard and John might have met Robin Hood. There's also Little John. He's been mentioned alongside Robin Hood since the earliest songs from the 14th century. He was very important in the stories and usually Robin Hood's second in command. In the stories, it's called Little John as a joke because he was 7 foot tall. That's taller than the tallest person you've ever seen. Now, there's a grave in Hathersage, which is not very far from Sherwood Forest. It has a gravestone which reads, "Here lies buried Little John, the friend and lieutenant of Robin Hood." And there was a bone in it which belonged to a very tall man. The grave is much bigger than a normal one too. Supposedly, his longbow and cap used to hang in the church as well. Maid Marion is said to be based on a real woman, Matilda Fitzwalter, who lived during the reign of King John. Apparently she was very beautiful, and stories tell of her falling in love with a knight who appeared at a tournament and beat everyone else in archery and jousting, then disappeared. So just like in the Disney film, King John wanted her to love him, but he already had a wife, so Matilda said no. There is a record of a real-life Robin Hood escapade that took place. In 1276, 2 archers were caught poaching, that means hunting illegally, in Sherwood Forest and imprisoned in the village of Blidworth. As they were waiting to be sentenced by the Sheriff of Nottingham, an organised gang of 20 archers and swordsmen attacked the guards and freed the poachers. So it seems like there was a real gang of outlaws in Sherwood Forest in the 13th century. Maybe that was Robin Hood. Some historians think that Robin Hood might have been the nickname given to a man called Roger Godbird, who was probably born around 1230, that's the 13th century, and worked as a guard at Nottingham Castle in 1264. That was just the right place for Robin Hood legends. From 1270 onwards, he became a powerful gang leader and archer who moved to Sherwood Forest. Roger Godbird robbed corrupt churchmen along the roads and stole their wealth. He hunted deer in Sherwood Forest and his band grew larger. The Sheriff of Nottingham was determined to hunt down the fugitive, and it's recorded that he followed Roger right across the country, but the outlaw always evaded him, just as Robin Hood escapes in the stories. Finally, Roger was pardoned by a king, just like Robin Hood was pardoned many times in the legends.
Looks good on you, old boy.
His name, Robin Hood, or a very similar name to that, appears in many documents like court records and histories from 1226 onward, when a man called Robert Hodd had all his goods seized in York and became an outlaw. He's named in 2 of the Shakespeare's plays from the Tudor times, and in 1561 John Major actually wrote them in his History of Greater Britain under his chapter about King Richard. It was at this time that flourished the famous robbers Robert Hood and Little John, and their 100 bowmen, who lay in wait in the woods, but only took goods from the wealthy, killing no one unless they were attacked. He would not allow no women to suffer injustice, and he gave riches to the poor. So if it was in a history book, it must be true. And that is my case for Robin Hood being a real outlaw living in Sherwood Forest.
Those are all great points, Henry. But be careful of believing something just because it was written down long ago. I've been doing some research too. We've talked about primary evidence, which is evidence about an event that comes from that actual time. Now, secondary evidence is anything that doesn't come from the actual time, but was written or produced at a later date, even if that was a long time ago for us now. Almost all the evidence we have for the existence of Robin Hood is secondary evidence. Even that account from John Major, the Tudor historian. Almost nothing is from when he was meant to have lived, and so there's little to prove that he actually did. And the biggest problem is inconsistency. The evidence we have doesn't agree on when he lived, where he lived, or who he was. Now, it's not a problem finding Robin Hood in the records. The problem is that there are too many references to him. Robert was a common first name, and Robin is a short form of that. A bit like you might call somebody whose real name's Elizabeth, but you'd call them Liz. Now, surnames, you might know, referred to the job someone did, where they lived, or how they looked. So Hood might be somebody who made hoods, or it might be somebody who wears one. And I bet there were a lot of those around. Now, you're right that Robin Hood, or Robert Hod, appears in court records, but they're there in the 13th century, the 14th century, and the 15th century. So either Robin Hood lived a very long time, or he wasn't the same person. It's possible that Robin Hood became a nickname or a label for an outlaw or bandit. Now, another inconsistency is Robin Hood's station in life. In the first stories, he's a farmer who wanted to overthrow the system, and that does fit Roger Godbird. And songs and rhymes in the 14th century depict him like this. But later on, Robin Hood becomes a nobleman who has his lands taken away when he upset the king. He's sometimes the Earl of Huntingdon in some stories. And yes, he would have had to be someone of a high status in order to marry Maid Marion, because she's under the king's protection in some stories. Or if she was Matilda, she's a baron's daughter. King Richard and King John first appear in stories in 1521. So if Robin Hood is based on one person, it's not likely that they featured in the story. Richard only spent 6 months in England in his entire 10-year reign. Most of the time, he was off in the Middle East doing crusades or on war with France. John was a good candidate. He was unpopular, and there's evidence that he schemed against Richard while he was away at the crusades. When he was king, John imposed high taxes and was eventually made to sign the Magna Carta, which said that the king was as much under the law of the land as the people were. However, in other stories, it's Edward II who's king, or Henry II, or Henry III. And Roger Godbird was pardoned by Edward I. So again, some inconsistencies in which king was involved. Around about the 15th century, Robin Hood became a popular figure in May Day celebrations and fairs. Now, there was a change in the story about this time to a more romanticised figure. It was now that he became a charity figure, robbing the rich to give to the poor. And now he became the wronged nobleman that we've already spoken about. Other characters are added to the story too, including Friar Tuck and Maid Marion. Yes, I'm afraid she's not there from the early stories, and so it's likely that she was added at this time to spice up the legend, and wasn't really a part of Robin Hood's life at all. Sorry, Marion. May Day was an important event for the English, so this probably made his legend grow more and more. So there is evidence that he did exist, but it's very confused as to who he was, where he was, what he did, and which friends he had. Stories do change over the centuries. The noble hero of films today, who gives to the poor, rescues Maid Marion, is not the same as the poor farmer who committed violent crimes and kept his money in the early ballads. So overall, I don't think Robin Hood can have been one real person. So what do you think, history detectives? Was Robin Hood a real person or not? But you can never really be sure about everything that happened in history. I mean, how can we possibly know what some people was thinking so long ago unless they've written it down? And even then, do we know if they're telling lies, whether they made a mistake, or whether they've changed things just to make it more interesting about themselves? You can't trust everything just because it's written down, even if it was a long time ago. That applies to today as well. You only need to look on the internet to see that.
I think the legend of Robin Hood is probably based on lots of different bits of truth, all put together to make an exciting story. There may have been not one person called Robin Hood, but his spirit lived on in many different people.
I agree, Henry. And I think maybe the story was changed to suit whatever the issue was of the time, whether it was an abuse of the people in power or dispossessed farmers, and they just needed a hero to sort things out for them and give them hope.
It's a brilliant story whether it's true or not, and it was great fun to play it being Robin Hood and his merry band in the woods.
That's right, and soon our friends will be able to go outside and play with their friends too. And what better to do than Robin Hood? Look, Henry, I've made you a hat so that you can be Robin Hood.
Aw, thanks.
And I'm going to show our friends how to make one as well so that they can play. But I'm going to use a brown paper bag that I've cut up because I think that'll be nice and sturdy for mine. So, when you've got it, you want it in a rectangle sort of shape like this. And you are going to fold it over long ways like that. Okay, now I'm going to try and make sure the corners come together neatly to give me a nice crease in there. I'm then going to fold it over again the other direction, again making sure those corners meet as best I can. But this time I'm going to open it up again because all I wanted there was just to be able to mark where the midway thing was. Okay. I'm going fairly quickly because I know not everybody's going to be actually making this along with us. You can always pause the video if I'm going too fast. I'm going to take now this top corner here and fold it down to the middle to make kind of a triangular shape up in that bit, certainly. And then the same on the other side. Okay, again, it's these creases, and being accurate is going to make your best hat. Now I'm coming down to the bottom, and this time I'm going to separate them out. So I'm not doing both sides at the same time this time. I'm just doing the top sheet, and I'm going to fold that up. Again, a nice crease. Then I'll turn it over and do the same again the other way. There we go. Perhaps looks like a boat now. You can use that as a boat. Might know that one already. Now to carry on to make it into the hat though, I'm going to tuck first this top triangle over. Just tuck it under the triangle like that. And then the other one forward the other way. And the same on the other side. Tuck that one under. Can you see I'm tucking it just there? And then tucking the top one over as well. Okay, we're almost there now. We're just going to tuck this bottom bit in just to make a flatter back and a longer peak to the front. So this time I'm just going like this, look. Tucking that in, and then I've got my nice long peak there. Okay. Now at this point, you could put a little bit of sellotape just to keep these bits down. But what you might want to do then is to paint it. So it's a lovely green Robin Hood colour. And then as a nice finish off, if you can find a feather outside, tuck it in just like Robin Hood would have done. I found a hen's feather here, a chicken's one, but you'll find them from all sorts of birds, I'm sure. Then you're ready to go and play.
You look great, Kath. Now we could be merry together.
Well, History Detectives, that's all we've got time for today.
High five, History Detectives. See you again soon.